Welcome to the Big Séance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the Séance. Greetings, friends. It's good to have you here at the Séance table tonight. We are in the midst of the October Halloween season. Can you hear those crunchy leaves blowing down the street? I've begun my traditions. You know, I have my movies I watch every year. Like, I just saw that Hocus Pocus is already on, and so I'll have to DVR that one on one of the repeats, you know, because it only comes on about 3,000 times a season. I've got my favorite Halloween sitcom episodes that I watch. The pumpkins have been chosen and they are waiting to be carved. I'm just constantly in that spooky mood right now. And, well, do you know who else is constantly in that mood? This week's guest. She celebrates Halloween all year long. She's Eva Halloween, the haunted hostess of the yearofhalloween.com. I've been following this blog for a couple of years now, I think. It has really been very interesting to see just how someone helps their readers to celebrate a holiday all year long. Ms. Eva Halloween, thanks for joining us tonight. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
I'm excited to have you. Okay, first super important question. Are you ready? Favorite Halloween candy?
Oh, it's got to be anything chocolate and peanut butter, right?
That was going to be my answer. Yeah. Good. You have the correct answer. Good choice.
I would say it's Reese's peanut butter cups, but you know, every year they seem to give me something new and more evilly chocolate and peanut butter. So those do seem to wind up on the bottom of the candy bowl. Oh, did all the kids not eat those? Guess there's a few left for me.
Well, you know, nowadays they shape those things in any shape possible for any holiday. It's kind of funny.
That's true.
What is your least favorite Halloween candy? Did you have one of those?
Oh, what are those Mike and Ike's actually supposed to be?
I would agree. They kind of taste like, if I'm thinking about, well, what are the white ones? The white ones and I think those are Good and Plenty. Oh, Good and like Plenty. That's what I'm thinking of.
Terrible.
Yeah, they taste like medicine. Do you have a favorite movie for the season?
Oh boy, that's really hard because I am a big fan of horror, and I think I might have been a few years removed from Hocus Pocus. I know how much everybody loves that, and a few other ones, and it's just not quite as much in my wheelhouse because I was, you know, had a lot of early horror memories. So, you know, The Exorcist and that sort of thing is really my wheelhouse for Halloween.
Yeah. There's a lot I don't know about Eva Halloween, and since you're very mysterious and you never show your face, but I'd love to learn a bit about the inspiration for the site and how it all got started. So how did the yearofhalloween.com get started?
Well, you know, it's kind of funny. I started the site back in 2011, and as you may know, as somebody who writes online and probably a lot of bloggers would tell you, I started with the best of intentions that I would post something every day on a Halloween theme, hence the name of the Year of Halloween. And that lasted about 2 days. And I think a lot of people who write online or try to have a blog find that sometimes it's kind of difficult to get into that habit of being able to publish something every day, especially when you're just not used to doing that sort of writing. So unless you're more of a person who's comfortable journaling online, it can be really difficult to get those everyday sort of posts out. And what I found really quickly is I was a lot less interested in talking about, my personal feelings about Halloween 365 days a year, as much as I really had a love of kind of curating what's out there and bringing it to people to say, hey, here's the best of things in all manner of ways that can bring that kind of creepiness and spooky fun of Halloween alive all year round without it necessarily having to be 365 days of pumpkins or black cat cutouts. There's lots of ways to have that kind of fun feeling all year. So that's how the site really evolved, as it became less of my determination to post up every day that had some sort of Halloween theme, and more about, hey, here's what's really out there to bring people that little bit of frisson or that creepy feeling all year long. And we actually are at the point now we do post about 5 to 6 days a week, I'd say, all year long. So it's been quite a journey.
And you have, and this actually confused me for a while until I figured it out, you have several contributors for your site. Why don't you tell us a little about that?
That was one of the other things I realized pretty early on is doing a lot of regular posting is a big help to have other people that you can blackmail into posting or otherwise drag willing victims into writing an article a few times a week. But at this point, we've kind of evolved to the point where we do have some writers that come and go. She's fabulous. I met actually at a horror convention. She has a great love of The Walking Dead and horror conventions. So she's become pretty much a roving reporter. So if there's an East Coast horror convention, she's pretty much likely to turn up at one. So there is actually a section on the site if people are interested in going out and meeting, like Tom Savini or Elvira, that there's reviews or notifications of horror conventions that are coming up, and that's really her wheelhouse. One of our other regular writers is Katie Einstein, and I actually met him through his site, Superficial Gallery, where I also write, and he adds a bit of levity to the site. He's a little bit of an interesting character, and I love having his kind of brand of humor. If you've ever seen any of his posts, they're a little bit different than the rest of what happens all week. So I love that.
There is a lot of humor, and that's some of my favorite ones, the ones that you're not really sure if it's meant to be humor until you keep going and read further. And you're like, oh, okay, I get it now.
I have told him that, and I actually really love his brand of humor, because you're reading it, and you kind of get about halfway through, and you start thinking, is this just stupid? Where is this going? And then right at the end, he kind of gets you at the punchline, and it's pretty unique, and I think I'm really lucky to have him writing for the site. And everybody who likes his brand of humor, he does run superficialgallery.com, so you can see a lot more of his writing over there.
Yeah, and we'll I'll link anything that you mention and want to kind of promote. We'll put in the show notes so people can find that easily. So you have several different categories that are actually really easy to navigate on your site. Kind of above on the top, like you have different makeup and costume tutorials and DIY and art and inspiration and different contests, which I've actually joined and actually won one of them, which was kind of exciting. And
how did you feel like you got a cocktail book out of that, right? How was that?
Yes, I got a cocktail book, and then I forget what you call them, the little. Oh,
I think they were wine charms.
Yes, wine charms. Love them, and I can't wait to use them this season.
Good. I
haven't tried one of the cocktails, but I'm totally ready.
Good.
Totally ready to do that. And it was a really cool thing too. It was the first time I'd ever won anything on an online contest. It was kind of an exciting thing.
Well,
I nerded out.
People know. Sometimes I wonder if they think that we say that we're having these contests and then do prizes ever really come out? But they do indeed come out. We actually do a big Halloween contest every year, which we'll probably do a little bit of a smaller one this year, but we do an annual Halloween costume contest, and that's a lot of fun. So a lot of times what we do is we either do a scavenger hunt or a costume contest, and people send us in pictures of their costumes, and we have sometimes a lot of great sponsor prizes depending on the year, but that's usually a blast, and everybody gets to vote for their Reader's Choice Prize. And I think last year we probably had about 80 submissions, so it was a lot of fun.
Wow. Yeah, between all of your different contributors and categories and just the in-depth things that you do, I can't imagine how much time you put into research and things on the side. That's a lot.
It is a little time consuming. That is probably the biggest challenge. And actually one of the ways I manage that is, and I'll put on my geeky glasses here, but I actually have a spreadsheet that I track all my posts and post ideas on, and I try to plan out, especially with, like, for example, with Halloween coming up, I actually have the next 6 weeks, every day of the week scheduled out with either a started post or a scheduled post that's ready to go for it. So we have to do a lot of kind of pre-work. So when I have downtime, I can start knocking those out. So it is a little bit of a commitment, but it's a labor of love.
I bet. I think my favorite, I've had several different favorite things that you've done, but I've kind of really enjoyed the Friday night features, all of the short films that you find. I had no clue really that there were so many short films of the, scary or horror genre. Where do you find all of your short films?
Well, it's interesting. I started doing the horror shorts about 3 years ago, and when I mentioned it to somebody that I was going to do it, he said, it's a great idea, and there's some out there, but you're going to run out of films really fast. And I'll tell you, we'll actually hit 100 short films featured on the site this October, right before Halloween. And it's a lot of, I keep an eye on, there's a lot of great sites out there that are short film dedicated. Shortoftheweek.com is one. There's a million of them that I look at pretty regularly. IO9 has a tendency to publish them, but there's nobody that's really dedicated to all they do are horror shorts. I actually think we probably have one of the biggest collections anywhere online that you can find. And then I'm on YouTube and Vimeo, and I'm really finding in the last few years, it is hard to break into the film industry, and a lot of up-and-comers in independent film have looked at short films as a way to kind of break into those major leagues without having a couple $1 million or having big backers or name recognition yet. But if they can get those shorts out there and get the attention that a lot of them really deserve to get into the horror industry, I think, in the last few years, have there been a lot of really scary films out? Maybe I'm jaded, but I feel like there's been maybe an overemphasis on special effects or CGI and a lot of lack of story or atmosphere. And these shorts, because they do have a limited budget, that's almost to their advantage, because we get to see how effective horror can be by telling a story or creating the right atmosphere, because they just don't have the budget for those special effects that I think sometimes are a little bit of a crutch for the big industry films.
I would so agree, and you actually stole my follow-up question, because I definitely agree with that. You can do so many scary things just with sounds and just, the atmosphere and kind of that old school spooky horror film style I love. Where did the idea of the 31 Halloween activities come from?
That is 100% from Acadia Einstein. And he actually, I don't know if you saw his earlier series, which he did 2 years ago, which was 31 Scary Things, and they were short videos. But he usually on the Superficial Gallery will do some kind of artistic, creative thing for Halloween, and he does one new one for each day of October. So usually once he posts those on the Superficial Gallery, the next year we use them as a weekly post, so we can start that countdown to Halloween about 30 weeks ahead of time. So we've done 31 Scary Things this year. It's 31 Halloween activities, and all of those cards he made himself. And if you have a chance to look at them on the site, they're really great.
And some of them are really funny. I just, the other night, I was searching through, and appropriate for this podcast, I found one about holding a séance, which was very funny. You had a recent post that you put up there was called Destined to Disappear, the peculiar photos of ransom rigs. And I just found it fascinating. It's something, collecting old random photos from people you don't know as a project is something I've considered kind of getting into in a nerdy way several times. But, I've been in the antique shops before, just kind of sitting there going through old photos. It's so something I can see myself doing. Tell us a little about how that post came out.
So Ransom Riggs, a year or so ago, came out with a book, maybe a couple years ago, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. And I remember picking it up in the bookstore since it certainly had a title that caught my attention. But the image on the cover had a girl, black and white, obviously an older image, and the girl was looking into a pond, and the reflection that was reflecting back at her showed two girls, which is just, encapsulates the kind of creepy things that I love. Mm-hmm. So I remember flipping through, and there was actually a lot of kind of bizarre and puzzling pictures that were tucked into the book. And I was really fascinated by that. And I had kind of put a pin in that back in the day to go back and find out if those were actually real images or if somebody had staged them for the book. So I did a little research on it. And he actually had been collecting those photos since his childhood in Los Angeles, going to swap meets and flea markets, and just happened to start collecting them. And actually, they were the inspiration, just writing stories from those pictures for the first novel. And I guess he actually has a follow-on starting now, and they're looking at a film adaptation of it. And on the site, he actually has a video that we posted where he went to abandoned sites in Europe to find a perfect setting for the orphanage, mm-hmm. which I just found really fascinating, that he took these kind of abandoned moments in time, and then once he had a story or a concept around them, he had to go and find the perfect abandoned location to match that.
Do you have a favorite costume or makeup tutorial that you featured on the site?
That's a good question. I will tell you that the most popular one is a Jessica Rabbit costume tutorial.
Uh-huh.
From the perspective of the tutorial, we go a little bit into the history of the character and some of those Rita Hayworth silver screen sirens that were the inspiration for her costume, then into some costume and makeup tutorials. But we also have a pretty big collection of photos of cosplayers for Jessica Rabbit, and that is certainly very popular.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard. I love them all. The one that I actually have been very interested in, I think I may use myself this Halloween, is there's one for a half teddy bear monster that's half your regular face and half a scary teddy bear.
Those seem to be popular now. Those are so interesting, the half and half faces.
Yeah. And they're, the thing about the tutorials that I try to feature, earlier in the year, we have some more hands-on construction type of things if somebody really likes to get into the DIY. But for the most part, the makeup tutorials are all fairly manageable. I mean, there are things that, hey, everybody can do these. And that's one of the reasons that I like to share them is, half of them you could just do probably with makeup you have or just makeup you pick up at the drugstore. And a few of them might need special things, but they're all very available during the Halloween season. And that's one of the reasons that we feature them, is because they're really things that anybody can do. And I think once you get just exactly the right makeup, the costume is pretty easy. A lot of times it's something that you can just source out of your own closet and just kind of go with your makeup and your accessories to really make a fantastic Halloween costume.
Now, be honest, but do you ever tire of Halloween? I mean, on a beautiful spring day with sun shining, flowers blooming, bunny rabbits hopping around, are you still thinking about Halloween?
Well, I won't say that I have it at the front of my mind 24/7, but there are always little things that come up that, like I said, the site it's not pumpkin carving tutorials 365 days a year.
Right.
So on a beautiful sunny day, might I sit outside with a book, and might that book be a Stephen King book? Yeah, it's possible. So I might have been guilty of that a time or two. My choice of poolside reading is probably a little bit more gory than your average reader, but I can't say that I would ever I think I would get sick of pumpkin tutorials all year long, but the kinds of things that I like to post on the site, I can't ever get tired of.
And there's many ways, I think, to keep a little bit of Halloween in your life.
Well, I hope so.
Last year, someone produced a commercial YouTube commercial for the year of Halloween that got everybody excited for the season. And I thought it was so cute and funny. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Was it the Talking Witch?
It was the Talking Witch, and it was, supposed to be you in showing your face for once. And
Right.
it was hilarious. I thought that was a really funny idea.
You know who will be thrilled to hear that is, again, Acadia Einstein, because we actually, where that evolved from is there's a site called Fiverr that will do
Oh, yeah.
short gigs for $5.
Mm-hmm.
And we had an agreement where we would each spend $5 to do a commercial for each other's site. And I think we had a very different interpretation of those rules or the objective associated with the commercial. But yes, his came out a little bit differently than mine, but he will be thrilled to hear that you enjoyed it.
So did it not work like you'd planned? Did it draw attention to the site at all?
Oh, probably not at all. But it entertained Acadia, and I think that that's usually the objective.
What was your plan for him, your commercial? Did it go better?
I'm sure it didn't actually go any better, but it was something specific to the site, and now I can't even remember what we did for his site. But I think I made a little intro for it and whatnot. I think, and afterwards he said, well, I thought that the goal was to make the worst commercial we could for each other, which I don't recall hearing that part of the agreement, but.
Well, I will tell you, it was good enough to tell you that I remember specifically where I was at when I saw it. I was walking the dog, and I was down the street, and I laughed so hard. I just thought it was really great.
Oh my God, I'm actually so pleased to hear that.
See, you'll need to pump it out again for this year.
I guess I will.
So I'm really big on nostalgia, plus Halloween is my favorite holiday as well. I'm assuming it's your favorite holiday. I've got a special episode coming up with a bunch of special guests talking about their memories from Halloween. You must have a few exciting stories you could share, or maybe what Halloween was like when you were growing up.
Gosh, favorite memories. I can't honestly say that I have any one particular memory that's crystal clear, or like the one time that I said, wow, Halloween, this is the day that I love. But even just the start of fall, with the season changing just a little bit, and you're walking and you can hear the leaves underneath your feet, and it's just a little bit crisp in the air, and maybe it smells kind of damp and kind of earthy, and there's a little bit of that woodsy smell, and somebody's starting a fire somewhere, and you're just at the point of the year where you're thinking, what would be good is a hot drink, or maybe some kind of icy cake, and that feeling that last bit of the year as things are changing, and it leads into these darker nights and kind of a countdown to Halloween, where everybody can find a way to become something else, even if it's just for a night. And I just, I have so many memories of those kind of individual flashes kind of built up over a lifetime. And that's really what is my favorite thing about Halloween, is just the whole season, and that feeling that's associated with the turn of the seasons to October and to fall, and all counting down to this one day where it's like a magical build up to that one moment where everybody slips into a second skin. And I think all I can think of are just these moments that reflect that individual feeling, or that kind of delight of the season.
Definitely. I would have to agree. Like, it's the smells, just like you said, and just the random visuals that kind of flash in my head. And one thing, people will make fun of me, but whenever I smell duct tape, for some reason, it takes me back to those masks, those old masks that you'd put on your face. And go smell a roll of duct tape and tell me that doesn't smell like a Halloween mask. Isn't that weird?
It is, although I can totally see that. I mean, there are just some things that take you back.
So do you have traditions when it comes to Halloween, or just that fall season in general?
Well, I think, obviously, we do all the standard ones as far as, have the big decorations for Halloween. There's a big Halloween party every year. You've got to carve the pumpkin. Mm-hmm. I think as soon as it's officially fall, pretty much everything in my house is made out of pumpkin. I was just at the store today, and I said, what is this thing that's made out of pumpkin? I could probably eat that. Is it a lotion? Pumpkin soap? I could probably find a use for that. Pumpkin soap. Okay. pumpkin shopping bags. That's good. I don't have any of those.
That's funny.
So we definitely, there's kind of an embrace of that from the start of the season. And then scary movies, obviously, we watch them all the time, but as it comes a little bit closer to Halloween, I think they're on a pretty regular rotation here. There is one thing a lot of times on Halloween night that I actually like to, it's the night that the kids are out, and I love to be able to be available, to make sure that their night is great. So sometimes that kind of cuts into going out and doing fun things. But usually, for people who do home haunting, if you've been building a lot of props and cemetery gates and fog machines out of suitcases or, whatever craft projects that you've been building up the last month or two, it's a little bit exhausting by the time Halloween's over. So a lot of times I actually, I stay in on Halloween night and I make soup and we have friends over and we watch movies and enjoy the last of the evening and kind of spread our own celebrations out around the actual day.
Definitely. And I think sometimes, like when I was growing up, everybody talked about trick-or-treating and everybody has all these memories of trick-or-treating. And for me, I wasn't ever allowed to just go roam the streets. For me, it was, you went to grandma's house to trick-or-treat and you went to the aunts and uncle's house to trick-or-treat. And so you had, you were driven in the car to the 5 or 6, places. And then after a few years of that, I decided, I have more fun when I stay at home and see the trick-or-treaters and watch the Halloween themed shows on TV and all of that. So to this day, like Halloween for me is sitting at home and just experiencing it all.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, though. I do think that maybe kids are not being allowed out to trick-or-treat as much as they once were. Maybe I happen to live in a neighborhood that's a little bit on the dark side, but well, we just don't get a lot of trick-or-treaters, and I'm like, how can I get busloads of them to my house because that's what I want to have happen, but, sometimes it's a little bit more of a trickle than a flood, unfortunately.
Well, I'll tell you, I did grow up kind of in a very small town. So even though it seemed like a lot of trick-or-treaters when I was little, I live in, like exploding suburbia now. And so let me just tell you, it is an endless parade.
Oh, really? Well, good. I'm glad that somebody's
down our street. Yeah, it's still happening.
Good.
Well, can you give us a sneak peek of some of the things that are coming up for the rest of October that you said you have planned?
Absolutely. So we just featured one of our first guest writers, and that is Paul Horn, a.k.a. Doc Splatter. We like to think of him as a advice columnist of the supernatural. So what happens if Ann Landers and Dr. Van Helsing had a baby and watched a lot of horror movies, and that's Doc Splatter. So you'll find him on the site right now. So we're doing a little bit of a giveaway with one of Doc Splatter's comic books for folks that come and comment on the site and then comment on his Facebook site. So we'll have a lot of guest writers between now and the end of October. I have a cookbook author that's coming in with a great pumpkin recipe for Halloween. And I have a horror author that's going to be doing a guest post a lot closer to actual Halloween. So in addition to those, we've got a bunch of tutorials that'll be coming up. So we have probably about 50 or 60 costume and makeup tutorials that are there in the archives, but we try to do a new tutorial every day. October 7th, we'll see a lot of Raven-inspired tutorials since that is the death anniversary of Edgar Allan Poe. We'll also have a couple new horror short films that do tend to save the best horror shorts for October. And this year, since Halloween's on a Friday, you'll see our 5 various shorts of the year is going to be published on Halloween.
So you won't be getting a lot of extra sleep between now and then, will you?
I'm trying to get all those posts written ahead of time.
Yeah.
As much as possible.
That's hard to do.
About 30% there, but I at least have them all planned out.
That's good. That's way better than I've ever been able to do.
It is, there's a lot of spreadsheets saved with a lot of post titles. You see, I actually already have, to be totally honest with you, I already have a spreadsheet going with my Holiday of Horrors posts for this winter. So as soon as Halloween's over, we go right into some Thanksgiving themed posts and then straight into starting in December, 13 gifts for horror lovers, great winter themed horror movies, some other spooky stuff on a winter theme. And we actually do that pretty much all the way through January. So this is actually our biggest usually the end of September through the end of December is our busiest time of year.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm impressed. I mean, my blog is nowhere near the production that yours is, but I'm a super, super organized person, and that just blows me away. That's amazing.
It's like I said, it took probably about 4 years of writing the site almost to get there. But I don't know how anybody else does it, but I can't possibly find time to do this much writing as I love to be able to do on the site without having that ability to pre-plan. And as I'm sure you noticed in our difficulty in getting this podcast scheduled, if I don't have it specifically written down in 4 places, I'm going to probably forget that I meant to do it. So it's a big help to me to have it actually plotted out. For example, on November 24th is St. Andrew's Day, and that's apparently there's a lot of superstitions associated with that, and it's known as a day that's especially suitable for magic and ghosts. So we have a post about some of the history and traditions of that's scheduled for the end of November, right before Thanksgiving. And another post that's scheduled right before Thanksgiving right now is there used to be a tradition before in the United States we really did Halloween where people actually, kids, wore masks at Thanksgiving and went around asking for treats and prizes, and that was called Thanksgiving masking. And if you're looking for some really creepy pictures of little kids in masks and old black and white photos, Google that, because there's some really terrifying photos there. So
we'll keep you up at night, I'm sure.
Yes, for sure. So a lot of that's, the kind of thing that we plan out ahead of time, because I honestly will not remember it if I don't have it written down somewhere.
So Eva, tell us what you do and some of the posts that are going to be coming up on other times of the year when it's not Halloween.
One of the areas that I love to look at is if you go into our art and inspiration section on the site, we have paranormal activities. I don't post in that nearly as much as I do in the history and oddities section, but you'll find a lot of items in there like where was the real Castle Dracula, or we have the Great Boston Molasses Tragedy where a giant tidal wave of molasses swept through Boston. And is that exactly Halloween specific? It's really not, but it's interesting and odd and unusual, and I think it inspires me to think of things of that kind of interesting and odd character that I like to see at Halloween. So
I remember that one.
There's actually an interesting story too, one that I just posted of, I don't know if you've seen it going around the internet, but there's a really horrible black and white photo of a gentleman with a face in the front and a face in the back.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was so fascinating because I saw it on, I think, Facebook, and I was wondering what the story behind it was, because it had this terrible little bit of text underneath it that was just chilling, that said that the gentleman in the photo had a demon face in the back of his head that was a conjoined twin that was said to whisper to him at night, and that he eventually committed suicide at the age of 23, which, it's very easy to find photos online, but those sort of things are often ones that catch my eye, and I love to do a little bit of the research behind it. And in fact, the story in this case is Edward Mordache is a turn of the century story. And I mean, I'm sure probably apocryphal because it's probably pretty anatomically impossible what they're describing. But what I found fascinating about the story is if you actually read the original story from that turn of the century time frame, it was actually much more chilling than what they purported in some of the modern stories about him. And I think a lot of that's really rooted in the late 19th century love of Gothic horror, where you have this decay and ghosts and demon twins. It's very typical of that type of writing, the sort of thing that Edward Allan Poe came out of, or some of those other writers that we think of a more Gothic tradition of writing. And I love the idea that we're spreading this meme around in 2014, but actually that meme was circulating really in 1850, 1860 maybe time frame. So everything that's old is new again.
Well, I have to tell you that I think that your site is amazing, and you and your contributors do a really, really, really good job, and you obviously put your heart into it and your creativity, and I hope people go and check it out all times of the year. Is there any main links or contacts or social media that you want to mention so that we can get that into the show notes so that people can find you online?
Well, you'll find me all year round at theyearofhalloween.com. I am on Twitter and Facebook. I'm not super busy on there, but you can always find the daily posts are on there and a few other choice bits of interesting ephemera that I find around the web. But I'm pretty busy on Google Plus if anybody actually goes on there, and Tumblr. So if you're on social media, you'll find me. I'm pretty much everywhere.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the Big Séance podcast. You rock.
Thanks, Patrick. I appreciate you having me on.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com, now the home of both the blog and the podcast. Just click on the Big Séance podcast logo or find it in the menu. You can also find and subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. Do you have any comments or feedback? Please contact me at patrick@bigseance.com. You can call my feedback line at 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. You can also record audio feedback right from the site using the SpeakPipe link included in the show notes. I could decide to include your voice in a future show. Thank you so much for listening and reading. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time. All of the spooky music featured in this week's episode is by Sam Haynes. You can find information about Sam and his music at www.hauntmusic.co.uk.